There comes a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they will be defined by what happened to them or by what they choose to become. The past has its grip. It pulls, it whispers, it reminds you of every mistake, every humiliation, every loss. But you must understand something fundamental. The past has no power except the power you continue to give it. You are not chained to yesterday unless you voluntarily hold the lock. To forget what has passed does not mean erasing your memory or denying what shaped you. It means refusing to let outdated pain dictate your future decisions. Pain can be a map, but it should never become your destination. Some people keep revisiting their wounds because it gives them a sense of identity, but that identity is built on weakness, not strength. And no future worth having can grow from the soil of old grief. Moving forward requires an uncomfortable kind of bravery. The moment you step into the future, you step into unpredictability. You abandon the certainty of old suffering for the uncertainty of new possibility. That takes courage. It requires you to look the unknown in the eye and treat it as an adventure instead of a threat. Every step forward is a declaration. I choose growth over comfort. I choose responsibility over regret. Your past mistakes can either be weights that break your back or stones you climb upon. The difference lies in your willingness to confront them honestly. When you stop hiding from what once hurt you, something remarkable happens. You begin to reclaim the authority that the past once held over you. You rise, slowly at first, but steadily, with a renewed spine and a clearer sense of direction. So forget what has passed not by dismissing it, but by refusing to live there. Let yesterday be a chapter, not a cage. Life is calling you forward with more intensity than you realize. There are responsibilities waiting for you, opportunities waiting to be seized, potential waiting to be awakened. The door behind you has already closed. Another one stands open in front of you. Walk through it with strength. Because the truth is simple. Your future cannot begin until your past ends, and only you can decide when that ending happens. The past, when understood properly, is nothing more than a collection of experiences that shaped your perception of the world. It teaches you what worked, what failed, what elevated you, and what broke you. Every memory carries a lesson, sometimes subtle, sometimes harsh, but always instructive. Yet many people misunderstand this role. Instead of treating the past as a guide, they treat it as a verdict. They believe that what happened before determines what must happen next. This mindset turns education into limitation. The past should refine you, not define you. Clinging to old wounds creates an illusion of safety. You tell yourself that if you keep the pain close, you won't be surprised again. But this is a misunderstanding of growth. Safety does not come from retreating into memory. It comes from strengthening your character so you can face the future with resilience. When a person chooses to wrap themselves in regret, guilt, or nostalgia, they are essentially refusing to engage with life as it is now. They become stagnant, trapped in emotional patterns that no longer serve them. A prison is not built of steel. It is built of thoughts you refuse to release. Human beings possess an extraordinary capacity to grow, adapt, and reinvent themselves. But that potential is only activated when you move beyond what you already know. If you keep replaying old stories, you block your mind from writing new ones. Instead of seeing opportunities, you see reminders. Instead of seeing paths forward, you see shadows of the past. The brain cannot create a future while it is busy mourning an old identity. Clinging to what has already happened is like trying to plant seeds in frozen soil. Nothing new can take root because the ground is locked in yesterday's temperature. Growth demands motion, and motion demands letting go. You cannot climb a mountain while looking over your shoulder. You cannot build a meaningful future while negotiating endlessly with the ghosts of your past. At some point, you must make a deliberate choice to learn from what happened and then step beyond it. This requires honesty, acknowledging how the past shaped you without allowing it to dictate who you become. It also requires humility, the understanding that you are a work in progress, not a finished product. The past offers wisdom, but wisdom is only valuable when applied, not when worshipped. When you finally stop clinging to the past, something powerful awakens inside you, the ability to see possibility again. You begin to recognize that your potential was never destroyed. It was simply dormant, waiting for space to breathe. You reclaim energy that was once trapped in memory and redirect it toward building a future worth living. You learn from your past, but you refuse to be imprisoned by it. And that is the turning point, when the past becomes a teacher rather than a jailer, and growth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Human beings are capable of incredible transformation, but that transformation only begins when they accept responsibility for the future instead of mourning the past. Grief over what has ended is natural. Loss, failure, disappointment, betrayal, and missed opportunities can leave deep marks on the psyche. But grieving becomes destructive when it turns into a lifestyle, when a person quietly convinces themselves that the story of their life ended the moment something went wrong. Responsibility is the antidote to this paralysis. It shifts your focus from what was done to me to what I can do now. And this shift is what opens the door to movement, direction, and purpose. The trap of dwelling on what has ended is tempting because it offers a form of emotional comfort. Regret becomes familiar. Pain becomes predictable. You know the contours of your past suffering intimately, and in a strange way, that familiarity feels safer than the uncertainty of what comes next. But staying loyal to the past is a betrayal of your potential. Nothing new grows in a mind that is loyal to grief. Responsibility demands that you step out of this emotional shelter and face the rawness of the future. It asks you to risk failure again, risk effort again, risk hope again. And that is what makes it such a powerful force. Taking responsibility does not mean pretending the past didn't hurt you. It means acknowledging that while you cannot change what happened, you can absolutely change what happens next. This is where personal agency begins. It requires a shift from passive suffering to active shaping. When you take responsibility, you reclaim authority over your narrative. You stop viewing yourself as a victim of old circumstances and start viewing yourself as an architect of future outcomes. This change in perspective is not small. It is the psychological equivalent of learning to walk again after years of crawling. Forward movement is impossible when you are emotionally anchored to what has already ended. You can attempt to force progress, but if your mind is still negotiating with past losses, your steps will always be hesitant. Responsibility breaks those emotional chains. It tells you, yes, the past hurt, but the future will not build itself. Responsibility turns you into an active participant in your own life. It demands planning, discipline, courage, and effort. In accepting these demands, you naturally begin to move forward. Not because the past has disappeared, but because the future finally matters more when a person finally shifts from grieving the past to taking responsibility for the future. They undergo a profound inner transformation. Their posture changes. Their voice becomes steadier. Their decisions become clearer. They begin to see possibility where once there was only loss. Forward movement becomes not just a hope, but a habit. And in that habit, the individual discovers something extraordinary. The future is shaped not by the weight of what has ended, but by the strength of the person who chooses to rise from it. Responsibility revives the human spirit, and through it, every new beginning becomes possible. Order in a person's life is not something that appears by accident. It is constructed piece by piece through deliberate action. But construction becomes impossible when the mind is constantly negotiating with old failures. Every past mistake acts like a voice whispering doubts. Remember when you failed? Remember when you weren't enough? As long as you keep arguing with those ghosts, You can't build anything solid in the present. Old failures become a mental bureaucracy that drains your focus and delays your progress. Order begins only when you refuse to revisit the courtrooms of your past and stop justifying why things went wrong. Negotiating with old failures is a psychological trap. It gives the illusion of productivity. You feel as though you're analyzing, reflecting, or being cautious, but in reality, you're standing still. You're reliving the past instead of creating the future. Failure should be acknowledged once, understood deeply, and then used as a foundation for wiser action. But many people turn it into a lifelong debate, constantly replaying scenarios in their minds. The more they try to fix what already happened, the more tangled their thoughts become. This internal chaos blocks clarity, and without clarity, no meaningful order can emerge. Designing new possibilities is the opposite of negotiating with old failures. It is a forward-facing mindset. It means recognizing that what you build next matters infinitely more than what collapsed before. It requires imagination, effort, and courage. When you start creating new goals, exploring new paths, or forming new habits, you redirect your energy toward growth. Your focus shifts from repairing the wreckage to building something better. This shift is transformative. It reorganizes your priorities, reawakens your motivation, and aligns your behavior with a future worth pursuing. Order is not merely the absence of chaos. It is the presence of structure, purpose, and meaningful direction. When you begin designing new possibilities, your life naturally begins to reorganize itself. You find that your thoughts become more disciplined, your emotions more stable, and your actions more intentional. You stop wasting time replaying regrets and start investing time in building competence. With each new possibility you commit to, you create a small island of order within the vast sea of uncertainty. Over time, these islands connect, forming a stable foundation for a purposeful life. The moment you stop negotiating with old failures is the moment your future begins to take shape. You free yourself from the gravitational pull of what once went wrong, and you reclaim the creative power that failure had temporarily stolen from you. Designing new possibilities is an act of self-respect. It signals that you believe you are worthy of a better future. And when you consistently act in accordance with that belief, order emerges almost inevitably. You become the architect of your life rather than the prisoner of your past. In that shift lies the essence of growth, renewal, and meaningful transformation. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People often assume it is a passive act, something weak, something easy, something done out of avoidance. But in truth, letting go requires a profound moral courage because it asks you to release what is familiar, even when that familiarity is painful. Human beings often cling to old wounds, broken relationships, or failed dreams simply because they are known. And the known, even when it hurts, feels safer than stepping into a future that offers no guarantees. To let go is to willingly detach yourself from the illusions of control that the past provides. The unknown is frightening because it strips you of certainty. When you let go of what once gave you direction, even if that direction came from pain, you are forced to face a landscape without clear landmarks. You must walk forward without the comfort of predictability. This is why many people prefer to remain attached to what has already failed them. At least they understand its boundaries. Letting go disrupts that familiarity. It throws you into a state where you must rely not on old emotional habits, but on your inner strength, intuition, and capacity to adapt. And that reliance is what makes the act courageous. Clinging to familiar pain may feel safer, but it is also the slowest form of self-destruction. You end up trapped in cycles of memory, replaying old narratives until they become the architecture of your identity. You become loyal to suffering simply because it is predictable. Letting go breaks that cycle. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that your identity is not supposed to be built from wounds, but from possibilities. It pushes you into a higher moral territory where you choose growth over comfort, responsibility over stagnation, and truth over emotional dependency. What makes letting go morally courageous is the element of accountability it demands. When you release the past, you can no longer blame it for your lack of progress. You can no longer use old pain as an excuse to avoid the risks of the future. Letting go means saying, what happened is real, but what happens next is mine to shape. That shift in ownership, moving from blame to responsibility, requires emotional maturity. It forces you to stand up straight, look at your life honestly, and confront the uncomfortable reality that the future is unwritten and depends heavily on your choices. Once you muster the courage to let go, something remarkable happens. You create space for renewal. New opportunities, new relationships, new paths, and new strengths begin to emerge. Strengths that were impossible to access while your hands were still gripping the past. Letting go lifts the psychological weight that kept you bent inward, freeing you to face the unknown with steadiness rather than fear. And in doing so, you discover a powerful truth. The unfamiliar is not your enemy. It is the birthplace of every meaningful transformation in your life. Letting go is not the end. It is the courageous beginning of everything that is still possible. Progress does not start with movement. It starts with a shift in perception. As long as a person stares at regret, they remain emotionally anchored to events that can no longer be changed. Regret is a backward-facing lens. It traps the mind in a cycle of what if only, and I should have. These thoughts may feel responsible, but they are illusions of responsibility. They do not fix anything. They only drain the energy needed to create something new. The moment you begin turning your attention away from regret and toward responsibility, your psychological orientation changes. You stop reliving the past and start preparing for the future. Responsibility is forward-facing. It demands that you acknowledge what is within your control now, not what was within your control years ago. When you shift from regret to responsibility, you reclaim personal agency. You begin to see yourself not as a consumer of circumstances, but as a creator of outcomes. This shift is subtle, but it is transformative. It reorganizes your emotional hierarchy. Instead of thinking, I wish things were different, you begin thinking, what can I do to make things different now? That single question carries the weight of growth, maturity, and movement. Stagnation from progress, urgency. Memory can teach you, warn you, inspire you, or guide you, but it cannot move your life forward unless you translate its lessons into behavior. Many people stay stuck because they worship memory more than they cultivate action. They replay scenes, analyze mistakes, and relive moments, believing that more reflection will heal them. But healing comes from action, new habits, new decisions, new risks, new commitments. Memory is the blueprint, but action is the construction. Without action, even the best memories become dead weight. Progress begins when you take the lessons of your past and convert them into strategies for the future. This requires discipline, courage, and an honest confrontation with reality. Taking responsibility means you stop waiting for ideal conditions, perfect timing, or external permission. It means accepting that the next chapter of your life will only be written if you pick up the pen, and the truth is simple: the longer you stare at regret, the heavier the pen becomes. Responsibility lightens that weight by shifting your focus from what harmed you to what will empower you. The moment you shift your gaze from regret to responsibility, from memory to action, your life changes course. You begin to feel forward momentum, slow at first, then stronger, then unstoppable. You discover that your potential was never destroyed by the past. It was merely ignored while you were looking backward. Progress is not the result of luck or external rescue. It is the natural consequence of choosing responsibility over regret, action over memory. And once you make that choice consistently, You stop merely surviving your past and begin authoring your future with purpose, clarity, and strength.